She questioned why a black family was sitting in first class, condescending, smug, sure they didn't belong. But halfway through the flight, the captain made an announcement and revealed a truth that turned her entire world upside down. There was a moment, barely a pause in the shuffle of passengers, that marked the beginning of everything. Row 1A and 1B had just been filled, and the seatbelt signs were still lit when Karen Whitlow, 38 years old and proudly on her 12th year as a flight attendant, paused with her beverage cart in the aisle. She looked over her shoulder, then back at the family seated in first class. A black man in a sharp grey suit, a woman in a tailored navy jumpsuit with a leather handbag tucked under her seat, and a boy around 10 with neatly braided hair. Karen's smile came, but it was tight. "Excuse me," she said with forced politeness. "Are you sure you're in the right seats?" Darius Ellington looked up from his phone slowly, calm but direct. "We are," he said. His wife Simone didn't speak, just met Karen's eyes, steady and without blinking. Her hand gently rested on their son's leg under the tray table. Karen chuckled lightly, more out of discomfort than amusement. "Oh, I just wanted to double-check. We've had a lot of mix-ups lately with upgrades. Some folks get bumped up by mistake. You know how it is." Her voice trailed off, her smile still frozen in place. "No mix-up," Darius said, enunciating every syllable with patience. "We paid for these." The boy looked between his parents, then at Karen. He sensed something off, even if he couldn't name it. He leaned into his mother, whispering something only she heard. Karen offered a stiff nod and moved on with her cart, but she didn't go far. A few steps away, she leaned toward her fellow flight attendant, a younger woman named Erica, and murmured just loud enough to be overheard by the man in 2C. "First class used to be predictable," Karen said, shaking her head. "Now it's a guessing game." Erica blinked. "What does that mean?" Karen shrugged. "Just saying, you used to look at someone and know where they were sitting." Erica didn't answer. Simone watched this exchange out of the corner of her eye. She didn't flinch. She didn't whisper. She reached into her handbag, pulled out a slim journal, and began writing. Her son leaned against her arm. Darius simply returned to reading the business section on his tablet. It wasn't anger on their faces. It wasn't shock. It was something more precise, like someone who had seen this same play before and already knew the final act. From across the aisle, a middle-aged woman with a Stanford sweatshirt glanced over. Her brow furrowed. She recognized the tension. She wasn't sure what she was watching, but it wasn't nothing. 10 minutes passed. The plane started its taxi toward the runway. Simone placed her hand on her son's and said softly, "We'll be home soon." The boy nodded. "Does she think we're not supposed to be here?" he whispered. "She doesn't know who we are," Darius said, eyes forward, "and that's okay." "But she acted like we don't belong." Simone looked at him, smiling gently. "People will do that, especially when they don't know what's behind the curtain." "But we didn't do anything." "You don't have to," Darius said. "Some folks carry their own story about you, whether you gave them a reason or not." He paused, then turned toward his son. "What matters is how we carry ours." The boy didn't say anything. He just watched his father for a long time and nodded once. But not everyone on that plane was done watching. The seatbelt signs were still on, and the cabin had that quiet lull right before the first round of drinks. Passengers scrolled through phones, popped gum, adjusted neck pillows. But something about row 1 still had weight to it, like a conversation everyone was pretending not to notice. Karen had retreated to the galley, just past the cockpit door, arms crossed, jaw tight. "She was looking at me like I was the one in the wrong," she said under her breath. Erica, standing next to her stacking napkins, looked unsure. "You mean the woman in 1A?" Karen scoffed. "All of them. Him too. The way he answered me? Like I'd insulted royalty or something." Erica kept folding napkins. "Well, they paid for their seats. It's not our job to—" "I know what our job is," Karen cut in. "I also know when something feels off. There was an attitude. They came in like they owned the plane." Erica didn't respond. She focused on the stack of cups in front of her. But Karen wasn't done. "They weren't rude," Karen said, almost defensively. "But you can tell when someone's trying to make a point without saying it out loud. I just said something about upgrades, and now I'm the bad guy. Maybe just let it go?" Erica offered gently. "It's a short flight," but Karen couldn't. Not yet. Just a few rows back, in 2C, a man named Larry Russo was texting his daughter. He'd overheard just enough of the exchange to pick up on the energy, even if he hadn't caught the full dialogue. He wasn't one to jump to conclusions, but he also wasn't blind. Something rubbed him the wrong way. He glanced at the family in row 1 again. The man was calm, scrolling his tablet. The woman, now jotting something in her journal, glanced briefly toward the galley and then back down. The boy looked bored, eyes half shut, but kept rubbing his mother's wrist. Something about that gesture made Larry feel something he hadn't expected. Like the kid was anchoring her. Back near the galley, Karen leaned against the wall. "I mean, who brings a kid in first class anyway?" Erica looked up from the soda cans. "Lots of people do." Karen rolled her eyes. "It just doesn't feel right. Like they're making a statement." But at that moment, her voice dropped to a whisper, part guilt, part suspicion. "I feel like they're watching me now." Erica glanced toward the aisle. Maybe they are. Up front, Simone had indeed looked toward the galley. Her pen moved slowly now. "Mom?" the boy said quietly. "Is she going to say something else?" "No," Simone replied without looking up. "She already did." "You think she meant it to be mean?" "I think some people confuse authority with permission, but that's not our burden to fix." Darius lowered his tablet and rested a hand on his son's shoulder. "Remember this moment," he said gently. "Not because it should make you angry, but because it's part of why we do what we do." The boy tilted his head. "What do we do?" "We build," Darius said. "We lead. And sometimes we sit in seats people think we shouldn't." A pause. Simone smiled faintly. "And we don't shrink just because it makes someone else uncomfortable." 2 rows back, Larry sat up straighter. He couldn't hear every word, but he saw enough. And he wasn't the only one paying attention anymore. Erica came forward with the cart, giving Karen a quick look before stepping into the aisle. Karen stayed behind, tapping her fingers against the wall. In row 3A, a young college student with headphones halfway off had been listening too. Her face was blank, but her mind wasn't. She would write about this later. Erica passed the Ellingtons with quiet grace, offering them drinks without pretense. "Water with lemon, please," Simone said politely. "Still or sparkling?" Erica asked. "Still is fine. Thank you." When Erica reached the galley again, Karen gave her a look. "So, how was it?" Erica hesitated. "They're polite. Graceful. Like they've been here before." Karen stared straight ahead. "Yeah, I'm starting to think they have." But just as the plane steadied in the air, a voice came over the intercom that changed everything. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged off, but the calm didn't last. Midway through the flight, somewhere over New Mexico, the plane hit a patch of rough air. Not extreme, but enough to get every tray rattling and a few hands gripping armrests. Karen instinctively reached for the intercom to prepare an announcement, but the cockpit beat her to it. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing some light turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll do our best to find a smoother altitude." The voice was calm, confident, familiar to a few ears on board. Darius looked up. Simone stopped writing. Their son grinned. "Aunt Colette." Karen blinked. She looked at Erica. "Did she say Colette?" Erica shrugged, slightly amused. "Yeah. Why?" Karen furrowed her brow. "That's not Captain Laird. He's usually on this leg." "Schedules change," Erica replied. "You know that." Karen nodded slowly, but kept staring at the cockpit door. In row 2C, Larry raised an eyebrow. He'd heard that name too. Up in 1A, Simone whispered to her son, "She's probably trying to keep things steady. We're not far out from Albuquerque." The boy whispered back, "Do you think she saw us when we boarded?" Simone smiled. "She always checks." Darius leaned in and said quietly, "She's watching from the cockpit. She sees everything. The turbulence eased slightly. Then came the second announcement. Same calm voice. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Colette Ellington. I want to thank you for your patience. We've adjusted altitude and expect a smoother ride the rest of the way into San Francisco. I'll keep you updated if anything changes. Karen froze. The last name. She looked toward the first row again, now suddenly putting pieces together she hadn't considered before. She mouthed the word silently. Ellington. Ellington. Her face changed. Simone was now calmly sipping her water. Darius resumed scrolling. Their son tilted his head slightly toward the galley and smiled as if sharing a private joke. Karen turned to Erica. That captain, did she say Ellington? Erica nodded again, slower this time. Yeah, and the family in 1A. Erica didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said she'd already figured out more than Karen had. Karen pressed her lips together and glanced at the passenger manifest clipped to the galley wall. She ran her finger down the first-class list. 1A, Simone Ellington. B, Darius Ellington. 1C, Jordan Ellington. Her eyes stopped there. She read it twice. Suddenly, everything she'd said, every assumption, every whispered comment, felt like they were echoing back at her inside a tin can. Karen turned toward the aisle, peeking between the curtains to look again at the family. Darius was resting with his eyes closed. Simone was journaling again. The boy now had headphones in, bobbing his head lightly. And just then, a low voice came through her earpiece. Flight crew, this is Captain Ellington. Please prepare for beverage service in approximately 10 minutes. I'll update if there are any weather changes. Erica looked toward Karen again. You okay? Karen didn't speak. Her mind was moving too fast. She'd accused them, however subtly, of being out of place, of not belonging. And now, the person flying the plane was one of them. Suddenly, all that confidence she wore at the beginning of the flight, it drained. She started questioning every word she'd spoken since boarding. Her tone, her body language, her sarcasm. Because now it wasn't just a matter of being wrong. It was about who had been watching the entire time, and from the front of that cockpit, Captain Colette Ellington had a full view of her crew. But what Karen didn't know yet was that this family wasn't just related to the captain. They had power on the ground, too. The plane had leveled out, but Karen wasn't steady. She stood at the back galley sink, rinsing an empty cup that didn't need rinsing, her mind spinning through details she'd missed earlier. The tailored clothes, the quiet confidence, the way they carried themselves. She'd pegged them as outsiders. Now she was the one out of place. She pulled her phone from the crew cabinet, unlocked it, and quickly searched Colette Ellington pilot. The first result made her stomach drop. There she was, Captain Colette Ellington, in uniform, standing beside a WestJet executive and shaking hands during a press event in Phoenix last year. The caption read, WestJet celebrates new strategic partnership with Ellington Ventures. Karen's eyes moved too fast. Ellington Ventures acquires 22% stake in WestJet Regional Division. She barely finished reading when Erica returned to the galley. Everything okay back here? Karen turned the screen around. Look at this. Erica leaned in. Her eyebrows rose. You think that's them? Erica asked, glancing toward row 1. Karen nodded, her voice low. It has to be. Look, same last name, same vibe. It's all starting to make sense. Erica tilted her head. So, wait, they're not just passengers. They're investors? Karen exhaled sharply. Not just investors, major ones. This isn't some bonus miles upgrade situation. They own part of the company. Erica blinked. That means... Karen put the phone down. That means I just ran my mouth to the wrong people. She paused, then corrected herself. No, the right people. And I was wrong. The gravity hit her hard now, not just because of the name on the news article or the captain's voice. It was the realization that she'd exposed something ugly in herself, in public, in uniform, and in front of a family that had said nothing cruel in return. Meanwhile, up front, Simone closed her journal and tucked it away. She whispered something to Darius, who gave a subtle glance toward the cockpit. Their son looked up. "She knows?" he asked. "She does," Simone replied. "What happens now?" "We land," Darius said. "Then we'll decide." He paused, then added, "But I think she's already learning something." From the cockpit, Colette's voice returned, this time directed to the crew. "Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for landing. We're 30 minutes out." Karen grabbed the intercom phone. "Copy that, Captain." She didn't mean to, but she hesitated before hanging up. Her reflection in the glossy black surface of the galley cabinet stared back at her, face flushed, eyes tight, shoulders hunched just slightly. She straightened them. "I'm going to check in up front," she said to Erica. "You sure?" "I have to." Karen walked the aisle slowly, her steps quieter than before. Not robotic, but careful. When she reached row 1, she stopped. Darius looked up first. No smile, no frown, just presence. "I just wanted to make sure you're comfortable," Karen said, words slower now. "Let me know if there's anything else you need." Simone didn't blink. "We're fine, thank you." Jordan looked at Karen. There was a question behind his stare, but he didn't ask it. He just kept watching her face like he was trying to memorize it. Karen gave a soft nod and turned back. Her heart beat faster on the way to the galley. Not from fear, but from awareness. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know if the family would file a complaint or if corporate would reach out. But something had shifted. She felt it in the way the passengers looked at her now, like they'd seen something. Not everything, but enough. But what happened after the landing would define more than just her shift. It would challenge her character in a way that couldn't be undone. The wheels touched down with a firm thud. A few overhead bins rattled, but nobody flinched. Most passengers were already leaning toward the aisle before the seatbelt sign went off. You could feel it, the small tension that lingered in the space between the rows. Not loud, not dramatic, just there. Karen stood stiff at the front of the plane, going through the motions. "Welcome to San Francisco. Local time is 6:42 p.m. Please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is turned off and the captain has parked at the gate." Her voice didn't have the same rhythm as it had back in Dallas. Row by row, passengers stood, stretching arms and grabbing carry-ons. Karen kept her eyes on the door, but her mind on row 1. Simone rose first. She straightened her jacket with calm precision, then reached for her son's backpack. Darius helped Jordan into his coat, speaking softly to him. Nothing anyone could hear, but whatever it was, it made the boy nod quietly. As they stepped into the aisle, Karen took one step forward, instinctively placing herself near the exit. She gave a polite smile. "I hope you had a pleasant flight," she said. Darius looked her straight in the eye. "We did." Simone's gaze lingered longer. "Sometimes silence says more than words," she said, not unkindly. "Have a good evening." Then she and Jordan stepped off the plane. Karen didn't move. Not right away. She turned slowly toward the cockpit just as the door opened. Captain Colette Ellington stepped out. Tall, uniform crisp, expression unreadable. Karen gave a tight nod. "Captain?" Colette held her gaze. "Everything go smoothly up here?" "Yes, no complaints." Colette glanced toward the cabin, then back to Karen. "Good. I'll be filing a crew report." Karen swallowed. "Understood." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even cold. It was measured. That was worse. A few minutes later, as passengers flowed into the terminal, Karen stood quietly behind the counter. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up to find Joseph Waibara, WestJet's local operations supervisor, walking toward her. He stopped just short of the gate desk. "Karen, got a minute?" She nodded. "Of course." They stepped aside to a quiet spot near the wall. Joseph flipped open his tablet. "We received a report from one of your fellow crew members, and Captain Ellington added some notes from her side. Wanted to ask you about a few things." Karen shifted slightly. "Okay." First-class passengers. Row 1. A family. The Ellingtons. Karen didn't speak. She didn't have to. Joseph continued. "From what I gather, there was some tone in your initial interaction." Karen closed her eyes for a beat. It was a misstep. More than one, according to Erica and the cabin log. Karen let out a shallow breath. I made assumptions. I didn't recognize them. They weren't asking to be recognized. They were asking to be respected. Karen looked away. I realize that now. There was a pause. Joseph tapped something on the tablet. Corporate wants a call with you tomorrow morning. Sensitivity protocol review. You'll be scheduled for a training refresher next week. Karen nodded. Understood. Joseph didn't raise his voice. Didn't scold her, but his last words stayed with her. Perception becomes policy when the wrong person's holding the mic. Let's not forget that. Back in the terminal, the Ellingtons had made their way down the corridor. Colette caught up with them near baggage claim. Hey, she said, smiling at her nephew. Hi, Aunt Colette. Simone gave her sister-in-law a knowing look. Your pilot voice is still sharp. Colette laughed. Yours wasn't bad either. Darius looked back toward security. Think she got the message? She's thinking about it, Colette said, and sometimes that's the best place to start. But the next morning would bring more than a training notice. It would hold up a mirror. One Karen wouldn't be able to look away from. Karen sat at her small kitchen table, a half-drunk cup of coffee beside her, her WestJet badge lying face down. Her apartment in Oakland was quiet, too quiet for how fast her mind was running. Her phone buzzed once, then twice. The screen flashed, corporate line, HR and compliance. She exhaled, stood up, then sat back down before answering. Hello, this is Karen. A smooth voice greeted her. Hi, Karen. This is Maxine Holt from Corporate Affairs. Thanks for taking the call. I'll keep it short. Karen sat straighter. Yes, of course. I reviewed your shift report from yesterday's flight, Flight 772. We also received a full debrief from Captain Ellington and the secondary crew member. As of this morning, you've been scheduled for a mandatory sensitivity and cultural bias training series beginning next Monday. Karen swallowed. Understood. There won't be disciplinary action for now. Maxine continued. But this incident will be noted in your file. The purpose of this training is not punitive, it's corrective. But Karen, I want to be clear. You weren't accused of using slurs or being overtly disrespectful. What happened was more subtle. That's what makes it harder to address, and even more important to correct. Karen's voice came quieter. I didn't mean to offend them. I thought, I was just checking. That's the point, Maxine replied. You thought you were being diligent, but you were actually reacting to a story in your head that never belonged to them. We don't just serve passengers. We represent this airline's values. That includes who we assume deserves to sit where. Karen nodded, then realized Maxine couldn't see her. You're right. There was a pause. I appreciate you taking this seriously, Maxine said. You'll receive login credentials for the training portal by the end of today. It's 3 sessions across 10 days. Completion is required for continued flight eligibility. After the call ended, Karen sat there for a long time, just staring out of the window. Her thoughts were scattered. The way Darius said, "We paid for these." The calm way Simone answered. The boy's question, "Does she think we're not supposed to be here?" She didn't want to admit how long that line had been echoing. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Erica. Hey, just checking in. You okay? Karen stared at it for a moment, then typed, I will be, thanks. She paused, then added, I learned something yesterday. Didn't like how I learned it, but maybe that's the point. Down in San Francisco, the Ellingtons were already back to business. They weren't ones to sit in bitterness. They'd had to move through worse in quieter ways for years. Simone was on a call with a board member from the airline's diversity committee. Darius was already booking travel for a leadership retreat in Tulsa, and Jordan, curled on the couch, was sketching in a notebook, drawing the cabin, the seats, the flight path, and a tiny figure at the front of the plane. His mother glanced over. Is that Karen? Yeah. What's she doing? Jordan smiled softly. Listening. Simone kissed the top of his head. Let's hope she really is. Meanwhile, Karen had opened her laptop. The training email had arrived. She hovered over the link for a moment, hesitating. Then she clicked. The first sentence of the module appeared. Bias doesn't need to shout. It often whispers from the mouth of certainty. She took a deep breath and read. But as her screen glowed into the evening, one final thought kept pressing at the edge of her conscience, and it would shape how she approached every flight moving forward. A week later, Flight 623 was heading from Seattle to Phoenix. Karen Whitlow was back on duty. Same uniform, same heels. But she felt different in them. The passengers filed in one by one, faces she didn't know, stories she'd never guess. An older couple held hands in row 9. A mother tried to get her toddler to sit still in row 13. A man in a military jacket stared out the window like he was somewhere else entirely. She greeted each one the same way, calm, steady, no assumptions. When 2 black women in their 50s approached first class, both dressed in business attire and carrying leather briefcases, Karen didn't hesitate. "Welcome aboard," she said. "Seats 2A and 2B are just to your left. If you need anything, just wave." One of them smiled. "Thanks. You don't usually see us up here." Karen paused only for a second. "You should," she said. "You absolutely should." After takeoff, while serving drinks, Karen moved slower, more deliberately. Her eyes scanned for comfort, not category. She listened. She caught herself when her old instincts tried to kick in, and replaced them with curiosity instead. She was learning that you don't fix something like bias in a week, but you can stop defending it. You can start doing better, moment by moment. Back in Oakland, Simone sat by the window of their home office, typing an email to the airline's senior board. It was a thank you note, actually. Not sarcastic, not bitter, just clear. She described the incident, the way it was handled, the grace shown in return. She offered to lead a quarterly training panel through Ellington Ventures, free of charge. She signed it. For the sake of progress, not punishment. Darius read it over her shoulder and nodded. "You really wrote that for her," he said. Simone looked out the window. "Yeah, for her, and a few more like her." Jordan came into the room holding a drawing. This one was different. He'd drawn a plane again, but this time the faces inside weren't labeled. Just people. All kinds. The pilot's seat was left empty. "Who's flying it?" Simone asked. "I don't know," Jordan replied. "Maybe all of them." Darius kissed his son's head and smiled. "Maybe that's how it's supposed to be." At WestJet HQ, Karen sat through her final sensitivity training module. She wasn't rushed. She took notes. She rewatched the parts that made her uncomfortable. She didn't skim past anything. And then she wrote something she hadn't written in years. A letter. Handwritten. Addressed to the Ellingtons. She didn't send it right away, but she folded it and kept it in her wallet. Not because she needed to show it, but because she needed to carry it. Sometimes the loudest apology is the life you live afterward. The story never made headlines. There were no viral videos, no hashtags, no boardroom blow-ups. Just a quiet shift in the middle of a cross-country flight, and the people who refused to match ignorance with anger. Not because they couldn't, but because they chose not to. That's the power of self-worth that doesn't need validation. And that's the lesson Karen took with her. 30,000 feet up, and every time her feet touched the ground. If you've ever been judged before anyone knew your name, or underestimated before you even spoke, let this story remind you, your worth is not up for debate. It's not about proving anything. It's about knowing who you are, even when someone else doesn't. And if you're on the other side of that story, ask yourself what story you've been telling before someone even says hello. If this message hit home for you, don't scroll away. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. We've got more stories coming, real human stories that might just change the way we see each other.